Blog Talk Radio.
That was Blue Bayou, and it was done by the daughter of a friend of mine, Kenny Wilson, and it fits our show tonight, and I will explain why shortly. This is your host, Yvonne Mason, with Off the Chain, and I'm going to tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, the more that I do this show, the more that I get involved with my guests and my listeners and watch this show just grow on its own, the more my heart is filled with gratitude and humility and appreciation and thankfulness for all of y'all. Because without y'all, I could sit here and talk all night, nobody would care. And I see it every day in the numbers that I run for this show. I was just telling my guest that we have tonight that as of this morning, just on the show itself, that our listening base has reached 89,506 listeners. Now, just let that soak in a minute. The show's not even 2 years old. We've just started a new year. We're at 89,506 listeners just on the show. And I have to give a big shout-out to Australia because they're 98% of the listening base for this show. And in doing that, in appreciation for that, I also have to promote a band that comes out of Australia called the Teskey Brothers. They are a blues band, and they should be in New Orleans because they sound like they are Southern born and bred. These guys sound like Otis Redding and Johnny Lang and Eric Clapton and B.B. King and Robert Johnson all rolled up into a nice tight package. If you have not heard these guys yet, go and look them up. It's the Teskey Brothers, Teskey. They're all over the map. They're all over the place. Just go look them up and buy their music because these guys are fantastic. When you add this show to the podcast that the show goes up on after the live show, which is iTunes and YouTube and FM.com and TuneIn Radio and Stitcher, SoundCloud, Mixcloud, Spreaker, Podcast, and Podcast Garden, we have reached 111,690 listeners. That it blows my mind. I had no idea. One podcast in particular, Podcast Garden, has a total listening base this morning of over 12,000 listeners. And it's amazing. I am so grateful and so thankful and so appreciative for each of you. Now, that being said, there's two ways to get on this show. You can contact me at Off the Chain Radio at yahoo.com or on my Facebook page. You can contact me at my Facebook page, Off the Chain, or you can contact me on my regular Facebook page and tell me you want to be on the show. Or you can contact some of your friends who are friends of mine and get hooked up with me that way. If you are not real sure, because, some of us are still shy, but yet you want to still get your product out there, go to advertisecast.com. Look up Off the Chain, and my prices are so reasonable they should be sinful or against the law at the very least. And I will run your ad for a month. From the day I get the ad until 30 days hence, no matter how many shows I have in that month, I will run your ad. Case in point, Miss Cece Chamberlain contacted me, and she has a podcast. It's called Inside Your Life with Cece. And it's a podcast full of thought-provoking interviews, motivational, inspirational, and it's to inspire others and to lift up your soul with feel-good stories, conversations to strengthen the mind, body, and soul. Because inspiration and motivation sometimes is few and far between for many. However, Inside Your Life with Cece is a glimmer of hope in a world of confusion and discouraging times, and sometimes just tough days. Sometimes it's just hard to get up. Cece's interviews will entertain you, uplift you, and bring the absolute best out of the world. Go check her out on iTunes as well as Google Play, www.podcast.com/Inside Your Life with Cece. Trust me, you will not regret it. Now, that being said, I have brought back one of my favorite people in the world. She is so much fun to talk to, and I found some little nuggets, as I am prone to do, that we didn't talk about last time. There was a lot we didn't talk about, but I found these this time, and I can't wait to talk to her about it. Author Ellen Byron, she wrote Body on the Bayou. It's the second book in her Cajun Country Mystery series, which recently won the Left Coast Crime Lefty Award for Best Humorous Mystery and is nominated for an Agatha Award in the category of Best Contemporary Novels. Ellen's debut novel in the series, Plantation Shutters, was nominated for Agatha, Lefty, and Daphne Awards and made the USA Today bestseller list. Book 3, A Cajun Christmas Killing, launched in October of last year. She's written over 200 national magazine articles, published plays, including the award-winning Graceland. She has TV credits, which include Wings and Just Shoot Me, Fairly Odd Parents, and Pilots. Ellen, thank you for joining us again. I'm so excited.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
We didn't touch half of the things that I wanted to talk about last time, like the TV series. And, ladies and gentlemen, this woman knows Martha Stewart. I saw that and I said, we have to talk about Ellen and Miss Martha. How in the world did you hook up with her?
Well, it was right after college, and I was kind of transitioning from, wanting to act to writing. And I met, I forgot, God, I can't even remember the name of an actor I met who said, I'm working with this caterer, Martha Stewart, and she does all these parties, and she's always looking for catering help. So, like a cater waiter, basically, you work in the kitchen and help prepare all the food, and then you go out there and pass it around, or you work a station at one of her parties. And I thought, that sounds great. So I got in touch somehow, and I was hired. And I remember I'll never forget the first time I met her. I took the train I was living in Manhattan because I'm originally from New York, and I had moved into the city. And I took the train from the city up to Westport, Connecticut, and I guess I took a cab to her house, that famous Turkey Hill house, which was her house. That's where she lived, and that's how she lived. None of that was manufactured. It was all the real deal for Martha. And I remember I went into her house, and off to the right was the living room, and this was a house that dated back to, I think, either the early 1800s or the late 1700s. It was a beautiful old house, just impeccably, just perfectly done with antiques. It was just everything you would imagine. And Martha was assembling a 3-foot high, or bigger, I would say, even a 4-foot high gingerbread townhouse with a creme brulee blowtorch. That was my introduction. And then, I think it was for at least a year or two, I did jobs, whenever there were weekends and stuff, and there were parties and weddings and bar mitzvahs even. Or I think I worked the first bar mitzvah she ever did. All different anniversary parties. It was mostly, I think, and also events. For example, we did a bunch of stuff. I think she was kind of like the in-house caterer for the Cooper Hewitt Museum on Fifth Avenue. So, and all different kinds of parties. So there were people taking pictures the time I was working with her, and I didn't really pay attention. And then in the early 80s, the book Entertaining came out. And her first book, that literally was a huge bestseller and put her on the map. And there I am, standing next to her in the kitchen of the Cooper Hewitt in a group shot, that's in the book. And there's another picture of me there. And there's a third picture somewhere, but I haven't been able to find it because I have a very strong image of it. I was in a raincoat in the backyard, in her amazing yard looking for something. Yeah.
That is just can you imagine being around a woman who is so talented in the kitchen and created such beautiful artwork with food?
Yeah, she really was that was Martha. I'm sure, she got so huge that there were, I can only talk about my experience with her. I really can't speak to anyone else's. My experience is she worked harder than anyone. She didn't really seem to sleep very much at all. She was always working. And that kitchen that's in the book is her kitchen. Where you see that stuff, that backyard was her backyard. This was, especially in the beginning for the book Entertaining, it was all shot at the parties we worked at her home. Where we did a lot of the prep work if it was a Connecticut event, or event we could drive to or get, funneled to or to somehow.
When you were talking about a townhouse, gingerbread house being put together with a creme brulee flamethrower, the visual is just unreal.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah, and it was, I guess, maybe it was 3 feet tall. It was probably 3 feet, not 4 feet. But even so, but it's in her book. If you look at entertaining, there's a picture, there are the directions on how to make this gingerbread townhouse. Not just like a gingerbread house. And it was like melted, candy to make the windows. I mean, it was just extraordinary. So,
wow.
And I was very fond of Martha. In fact, I, 8 years later or something after I worked for her, I was doing my first job column for Glamour magazine in the early 90s, and I interviewed her. I got on the phone with her, and we had a great, we caught up, and she told me about, what happened to some of the people we had worked with during that time, and unfortunately, sadly, it was the 80s in New York, and so a lot of, the gay guys had passed away from AIDS, but Martha knew that. She would say, oh, so-and-so, and she was huge then. It wasn't stuff she necessarily needed to know, but she did. And so, I actually would love to see her again and catch up, but, I don't even know how to make that happen. So,
because I love her,
I'd like her
to happen.
Yeah, I'd like her to know, that she kind of inspired me, because I'm not a cook by nature, and all my books have recipes. And part of that is because I think, well, if, Martha could do it, I could do it. And let's see, is there anything I can take that I learned from Martha that I can use here in creating a recipe? So, I'd love to tell her and share some with her and, just catch up. And I actually knew some of her family, too, who sadly, her younger sister, Laura, I, knew the guy she met and eventually married. And then he passed away very young of cancer and left her a widow with 2 kids. Young, like he was like 30 or something, or early 30s. And then she remarried, and we'd lost touch by then. And then her brother, Martha's brother George, who I worked his wedding, and but now I read that he just passed away. And these people, they were young. They were younger than Martha. So and she was very, and she was very close to her family, and they all worked. Most of them, I think of her brothers and sisters worked for her. So,
wow.
Yeah, she was very loyal to them.
That is amazing. And to think, see, ladies and gentlemen, this is what people don't understand is no matter where you go, who you talk to, where you're seeing or what you do, you're touched by that experience. You leave a piece of yourself and you bring a piece of that other person with you. Just amazing. I am so proud of you for having that experience with her.
I'm so glad I did. It was never anything. To me, when you're doing it, it's like, okay, well, I'm just working at these. Because she was just a caterer who was, but a very determined, hardworking, ambitious, smart, and with a gift, a gift that you could. I could only admire. She got some of her. I don't know some of her recipes. In fact, I think in that book there's one recipe she credits to one of the girls who worked with us. But I'm telling you, that house, that kitchen, all that in the book, that was Martha. That was how she lived.
Oh my! And look at you now, putting recipes in your books. In the gift, it's the gift that keeps on giving. So, how did you wind up with TV credits, including Wings and Just Shoot Me and Fairly Odd Parents? I can't talk tonight. Fairly Odd Parents and Graceland. That had to have been hard to have gotten into to become a writer for those series, because I remember Wings.
Right. Well, Graceland was a play I wrote. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. No, I came out, I transitioned from performing to writing, and I did improv simultaneously because that kind of scratched that performing itch for me, and I didn't have to memorize lines, and, it was much more casual. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And I wrote Graceland, and then I wrote these, and that got produced, and then I wrote a companion piece to it that I love, Asleep on the Wind, which I actually love even more, I think. And they got, they got published together because they make a full evening. And, and then I I was doing freelance writing in New York and teaching playwriting, and I began to get kind of a little burned out, and I thought, you know what, and I had written a full-length play that was a finalist in the O'Neill Theater Festival, which is a huge thing in the playwriting world, but it was a finalist. It didn't, which was enough to get me readings at different theater companies in New York, but it was like I'd get a reading, and then I'd get notes, and a reading and notes, and I finally remember, I was sitting there getting notes from yet another reading at Circle Rep, which is a very prestigious off-Broadway house at the time, the home of Lanford Wilson's plays, and I just remember thinking, if I'm going to have to take all these notes, someone should be paying me to do it. And I thought, I need to move into television, and unfortunately that required, hold on a sec, hold on. Unfortunately, that required leaving New York, which I loved and was my hometown, and moving to California because that's where the work was at the time. So I had to make the move, and then it took a couple of years to break in. I was teaching sitcom. I was teaching playwriting at UCLA Writers Extension Program, and I got a free class with every semester I taught. So I was taking sitcom classes, and I met a woman, and we had a very similar sensibility. We were in an advanced writing lab, and we kind of started working together and thought, well, let's try to go out as a team. And I don't share her name because it's not her journey, so it's
right.
I don't. So we started getting. At the time, everybody said, let's get some women. It's kind of still. It's like if I told you if I had a dime for every time I heard from an agent or a manager, they have their woman. It's still very, there's still a huge imbalance. But, we were, and then when you're a team, they often like teams because you don't get twice the money or even 2/3 of the money. You get the same price you'd be if they were paying for a single, but they get two bodies instead of one.
Right.
So it's kind of a 2-for-1 deal. So then we worked for years, and we still, we're still out there looking for work. Fairly Odd Parents transitioned into a show called Bunsen is a Beast at Nickelodeon. But that ended the end of April, so I've been gainfully unemployed ever since. Just working on my books, that I got, yeah.
And and we're going to get to your books because that leads into another blog that I read that you wrote that totally fascinated me because I like studying about funerals and mourning and death back in the day because it's so much different than today. And during that part of history, I call it the Victorian era, and even past the Civil War, they had some strange mourning practices.
Mhm. Oh, so you read my blog? Yeah.
So tell the folks about it because from the South, because I am from the South, I understood those mourning practices because that's how my grandparents and my great-grandparents mourned.
Well, it's I wish I had read my blog post just to fill people in. St. Joseph Plantation is a plantation on the River Road in Louisiana, about an hour, 45 minutes or an hour north of New Orleans, and it's a beautiful place. And they, around Halloween, they do what they call a Creole mourning tour, where they have reenactors who act out the parts of some fictional people and then some people who actually were alive at the time, and they recreate an 1850s like a family mourning the passing of doctor, I forgot what his name was, a doctor who's passed. And it's a fabulous. I just love doing it because it's a living history tour. You're welcomed by the priest, quote unquote, and then you meet other. You're taken upstairs by one of the mourning widows, and as they're giving you the tour, and they're showing you like where the mirror has been covered with black, and that's not just because it's that mourning. It's to keep the spirits. It's so the spirits don't suck your soul in. Because there are a lot of superstitions attached to the whole thing, and then they had written down there are very strict rules, especially for women, of course, about what they could and couldn't wear, And like in mourning, excuse me, I keep yawning because I talk too fast and I don't breathe enough. But it's not exhaustion, it's bad breathing habits. But for example, like I think the first year, widows could only wear flat black. And then after that, they can graduate to black that has a sheen to it. And then after that, 6 months or a year later, and then eventually they can go to gray and then to violet. And, I think a lot of these widows probably expired themselves before they even got to violet. So, and just little things like, putting the body in the horse-drawn hearse head first, and I'm trying to remember which way it is because I'd have to read the blog post again, so that the soul, so they couldn't, I think head first, so that they couldn't suck you in, suck your soul in or suck your life force in as they were going off to the cemetery. But one very interesting thing, and I don't remember if I put this in or not, I might have, is that one reason that someone would lie in state for 24 hours or whatever, they'd be laid out in the home, was to confirm they were actually dead. And they weren't buried alive because, there was always a chance, and I'm sure it actually happened, which is horrifying to think about, that the person was in some sort of coma or vegetative state that they might actually come out of. So I think for 24, 48, even maybe 72 hours, they lay in state to make sure they had truly expired, which was a sensible thing.
One would
considering the alternative.
And didn't they also even dress the little girl's dolls in mourning clothes?
Yes, even the doll was dressed in mourning. So, which I kind of thought was great. Yeah, the kids, and there were, even to the point where with mourning stationery, that the border, it was white with a black border, but then the border, the longer you've been mourning, the border would shrink. It would, go from very thick to less thick as time went on, which is such a little detail. And the children's mourning clothes would be like a white dress with black trim. It was a fascinating tour, and I just, and I happened to be in Baton Rouge appearing at the Louisiana Book Festival. And then I went and stayed with a friend, Gaynell. I spent the night with her, who's immortalized in my books as Gaynell Bourgeois, which is her actual name, Gaynell Bourgeois Moore. But and then I decided to take this tour, and I'm so glad I did. It was the first tour of a Sunday morning, so I was literally the only person on it. It was a tour for
me.
And then the next tour people were...
That's the kind of tours that I like to take when it's just a couple, because they can spend more time with you and go into more detail.
Well, the woman who introduced the tour is actually a descendant of the family, the original family, or the family that's owned it for years. I don't know if it's the original family that built it, but it's a family it's been in the family for generations. And it was great because they have a charming gift store, and she and I got to talking, and and she said she'd love to sell some of my books. So I had some paperbacks that I had received from my publisher when it got when a mass market edition of Plantation Shutters was created for Harlequin's Worldwide Library, and I had a box of them. So I sent her, about 5 just to see if she could sell them, because for me it's that'd be great if someone discovers my book at a plantation store. I love that. So,
and also, something else I found fascinating is they stopped the clocks.
Yes, they stopped the clocks, and I wish I could remember why that was. If it was just to memorial, I think it was really to memorialize I think it was because that's when time stopped for the departed.
Mm-hmm.
So, so they that was like an homage.
And they
I think that's also when the soul left the body, or that.
Let's see. I'll find it for you. Let's see.
Yeah, I should.
They went in feet first into the hearse because.
Yeah. Okay.
And there were strict rules about time to mourn. The spouse was a year and a day to 2.5 years. Children above 10, 3 months to 1 year. Children below 10, 3 to 6 months. Infants 6 weeks and up. Siblings, 6 to 8 weeks. Grandparents, uncles, and aunts, 6 months. Cousins, aunts, uncles related by marriage, 6 weeks and 3 months.
Yeah.
Distant relatives or friends, 3 weeks and up. Okay. And let's see why the clocks were stopped for I know I read it, but I can't remember. Oh, they were stopped at the moment of death as a mark of respect for the deceased for whom all time has stopped. Right,
there we go. I just looked it up. Oh, yes, and it's every mirror was covered with black cloth because shiny surfaces attracted spirits. And they didn't want more spirits coming into the house and possibly taking someone out with them. So, yeah.
Now, also on your blog, and because you do the Bayou series, you talk about places to visit in New Orleans.
Yes, and I actually have a chapter in each of my books called the Lagniappe chapter, which tells about some of the real people and places that inspired the fictional ones in my book.
So, ladies and gentlemen, no, y'all can't go now. You got to wait, because she's going to talk about Body on the Bayou and the first one in this series, Plantation Shutters. And then we're going to talk about a Cajun Christmas Killing, because I was looking at that cover right before the show, and I had not noticed it before. Mm-hmm. But you have skeleton heads as part of the decorations on that Christmas tree, and I loved it.
Oh, well, that was actually my agent's idea, because when the cover came in, it was beautiful, but we needed something that, an element of suspense to it. And I was hoping to put like a bonfire on fire in the background, because the whole story of the book revolves around a very unique tradition in this part of Louisiana called bonfires on the levee. And what they do is they built these giant bonfires. Most of them are, teepee shaped, but they do them in all different shapes. When we actually got to go experience this, because I really felt, this is something I need to experience if I'm going to write about it. Uh-huh. So we went and spent Christmas in 2015 in the area and got to go to a private party right across from the levee. And I was running around. It was raining, and I was like running around. I gave all this to my character, that I was running around on the levee, and I was covered with soot and water, and had to take a big shower before going to Mass that night, Christmas Eve Mass. Oh, shoot, I forgot my train of thought.
We're talking about the bonfires and the cover and the skeletons.
Oh, the skeletons. And then the publisher was concerned that people would not know what that was, which I understood, but I figured they'd find out eventually. But anyway, so my agent actually came up with the idea, well, what if there's some, something ominous, some kind of ominous ornaments on the tree, like murder weapons? And so, the designer went with that, and the book cover illustrator, who's fantastic and just does a beautiful job, Stephen Gardner, went with that, and it's great because it is that little touch. It's like, oh, this is all Sia, but what is that?
Oh, well, there's something else there.
Exactly. So I just love that.
Well, I had not noticed it before, and I'm sitting there looking at it. I said, no, she didn't, and I said, yes, she did.
Yeah. Just because
it's so cute.
I mean, I really feel that like a mystery cover should have some element of suspense on it, even with a cozy. Some of them don't. I mean, I have a stack of books by people I know that I'm looking at just, to keep up with what people are doing, and some of them don't have an element of suspense. But for me, I like it, because I think it draws people in.
Well, it did me.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear that.
I'm going, my word, I got to go check this out. But I got to go back and read the first two first. I know you can read them, as standalones, but they're more interesting if you read them in sequence. And since we're talking about that, tell the folks who may have been hiding under the rock the first time you were on the show about Plantation Shutters and then Body on the Bayou and then A Cajun Christmas Killing, because, ladies and gentlemen, even though I haven't read these books yet, they're on my to-do list because these are great books, I'm telling you. So tell the folks about Plantation Shutters and then Body on the Bayou.
Well, Plantation Shutters, my protagonist is a woman named Maggie, short for Magnolia Crozat, was 32, and she went off at, when she was 18, she went to college in New York at, an art institute, and then met a guy and lived in Brooklyn, and they had a gallery together, and but he wouldn't commit to her, he wouldn't commit to marrying, so she gave him 6 months to commit, and during that time he met and married someone else. So she's returned to Louisiana kind of to lick her wounds, and her parents and her grandmother, grandmère, run her father's family's plantation as a bed and breakfast. So she's staying there. She's sharing a cottage on the property with her grandmother, and they're running this as a B&B. And meanwhile, she also gets a job, a part-time job working as a tour guide at a plantation that had belonged to her mother's family, but has been donated to the state, and eventually it's sold and run by a private historic, society, a nonprofit foundation. That happens in book 3. So that happens in Cajun Christmas Carol. But anyway, she gets a job as a tour guide there, and all the while she's trying to get her art career up and running. But in Plantation Shutters, which is, she hasn't been back that long, she's just getting settled, and there is 2 people die, a couple, and I don't want to reveal too much. One death was an accident, was natural causes. The other wasn't, and it happened simultaneously. So there's always the fear. It's these plantations are enormously expensive to keep up, and they're basically just getting by. So in order to protect the family business, it behooves her, because also the local police chief carries a century-and-a-half-old grudge against the Crozat family, because his name is Rufus Durand, is because one of his antecedents was engaged to one of Maggie's and cheated on her, and she broke it off. And the legend is that she cursed the family's relationships, and Rufus has had terrible relationships, so he blames the family. So he doesn't really want to help them solve any murder. In fact, he's happy to see them struggle and suffer. But then his very handsome detective cousin comes to town, and he moves to town. And Maggie at first, of course, thinks he's in it with Rufus, so she doesn't like him. And he's got a 7-year-old son who's on the spectrum and has a condition called selective mutism. And that's something that I saw. I've seen, friends' kids and kids I've seen have had it. So, but eventually she realizes that Beau, this guy, he's a good guy, and she becomes very fond of his son, who turns out to be enormously talented artistically. So there's the romance element, as their relationship grows through the books, and her relationship with Beau and with his son Xander deepens. And then, of course, there's the mystery. And I think part of this comes from my experience writing for television, where, if you look at dramas and even comedies, but more so dramas, I think, there's the case of the week, but there's also the ongoing arc of the relationships between the characters. On Castle, well, they end up getting married, So that's how I write my series. That it's, there's the case of the week, and then there's also, the ongoing relationships of the people and how they grow and change. That being said, you can still, if you read the 3rd book last, you'll be caught up. I mean, there's enough to catch you up. You're not going to be like, what, who, what, hey? So I always put enough, without putting too much backstory in, there's enough, to hold your interest. If you're in the mood to read a Christmas book and you haven't read the other 2 books, then feel free to go for it.
So what happens on Body on the Bayou?
Body on the Bayou. She has some coworkers at Doucette, which is a plantation where she gives tours, and 2 of them become very close friends, and one of them is a giant pain in the ass, Vanessa, and she's been dating Rufus Durand, the Crozat's, basically the enemy for years, and so they're finally going to tie the knot, and she's pregnant, and he's finally going to make an honest woman out of her. And so, but she freaks out because a distant cousin is coming from Houston, and she's going to stay at Maggie's, but this woman is a bad person. And she's the illusion. She seems like she's, butter wouldn't melt, but she's not. She's really almost a grifter type. And she's like a designer and, very seems very, upscale, but she's really a bad person. But then then eventually what happens is she is murdered, and Vanessa is the suspect. Maggie has to Maggie has been kind of forced into being Vanessa's, maid of honor. And Vanessa is a bridezilla. So Maggie is stuck being Vanessa's maid of honor and trying to keep the bride out of jail. So
I bet that is a fall down funny book.
It's I have to say, that's the book that won Best Humorous Mystery last year at Left Coast Crime. It won a Lefty Award for Best Humorous Mystery, and it was nominated for an Agatha for Best Contemporary Novel. And I have to say, it's pretty funny, But it's also, I always try to but also it's also kind of touching because Maggie's relationship with Xander, the spectrum boy, the boy who has Asperger's, develops more, and there's some really touching developments in that relationship. Because I love writing humor, of course. I almost cannot write without it, but I really like to bring other elements, to try to deepen it, so it's not just a slick, fast read. Like with A Cajun Christmas Killing, there are elements of terrible business practices that are, ruthless business practices that, are just make you want to scream. And then there's, a character who's racist and anti-Semitic, in a very subtle way. And it's, and it's this class system. So there are elements of all of that, but I weave it in with, hopefully with humor. So.
Well, just from listening to you talk about these wonderful books, when you were talking about Vanessa and Maggie, and Vanessa being the bridezilla and Maggie trying to wear all these different hats and trying to keep Vanessa calm and out of jail,
right.
And
right.
The visual in my head just flew by, and I'm chuckling to myself because I see these two women, polar opposites, and trying to make the best of a bad situation. I mean, not only is she getting married, but she's pregnant as well, so you've got the hormone
right.
thing going on as well.
Exactly. And there's a big twist at the end of the book that I won't reveal because it's.
Oh, please don't know. But the visual is just, I can see it. It is so clear in my head. Now I know I have to read the books.
Oh, great.
Because I got to see if the women are as I picture them in my mind.
Oh, yeah, I hope they are.
I bet they are. I guarantee you they are. That is just too funny. No, ladies and gentlemen, y'all cannot go now because we are not done talking, because Miss Ellen is working on something that is very interesting. I think the last time you and I talked, I think we touched on this, did we not?
I'm not sure.
About the disappearance of your grandfather and doing a standalone?
Yes, I think we did touch on that. Yeah, we did touch on it.
Because I think I said, write that story, and now you are.
Yeah, I wrote a draft of it, and went through it, and I have it out to some of my friends, beta readers, and it's set in the past and the present, and it's actually set in New Orleans, and I'm waiting to get I've gotten some notes back. I have some hurdles to jump for writing wise that have been kind of difficult to find out the answers for. So I'm hoping that I can and that I do. So I'm working on it. I just haven't. I'm sure I will eventually find the answers. I just wish I could find them rather quickly rather than slowly.
Oh, they will come. Trust me, when you least expect them. So tell the audience, whet their appetites a little bit, because that conversation is coming back to me now in how it intrigued me when you were on the show the first time, and how it would make such a wonderful story.
Well, my grandfather was a low-level mobster, a Jewish mobster, and very low-level, and he disappeared in 1933, and so, we don't know if he was done in, which was indicated to my grandmother by some of his gangster pals, or if he, disappeared and went off to start a new life. And I actually recently had my DNA done with Ancestry.com to see if any relatives, unknown relatives, popped up. And ironically, a second cousin on the Italian side has appeared, but no one on the other side. So, and I'm trying to figure out how to, I signed up for the international database, and I'm trying to figure out how to access that, because if he did go somewhere, it was most likely to Canada. So I haven't figured that out yet. And unfortunately, the cousin who I didn't know existed on the Italian side, who I've tried to reach out to, has not gotten back to me, because I'd love to find out how we're related. So, I'm really not sure how the whole ancestry thing works, because I seem to have a trillion third and fourth cousins. But if this, because he was my birth grandfather, I believe that any relative would have to, anyone who was, if he got married again and sired other children, they would be a much closer match, like a second cousin to me. So,
and it will pop up. I had mine done a couple of years ago, and answers that I've been looking for a very long time are now being answered. So
that's interesting.
They pop up at the strangest times.
Yeah. Did they really? That's interesting. Yeah.
So if you're one of these days, you're gonna get a ping, and you're gonna go, "Who is that?" And you're gonna go in there and go, "Oh my goodness, that's the answer I've been looking for."
Well, yeah. I mean, or I've really come to think that he probably was, killed. And because I only found out that recently, that when my grandmother went to look for him, that these gangster pals told her she'd be lucky if he wasn't at the bottom of the river. So, which leads me to believe that's exactly where he ended up.
Probably. He either knew too much or told too much.
Exactly. Or tried too hard, tried to impress people and failed at it.
Uh-huh.
So.
And in the 1930s, that was the heyday of the mob coming into fruition from other countries, especially. I mean, they were all vying for a seat at the table, and they didn't care who they killed to get that seat.
Well, really, what put the mob on the map in America was, Prohibition.
Uh-huh.
It started because I've done some research, and there were gangs and illegal gangs and in general that weren't necessarily Italian. In the 1800s, gangs of New York is famous, for detailing that story, and then I think at the turn of the century, the late 1800s, the Italian mob started to kind of foment or be created here. But really, Prohibition is what really gave it its wings.
Yes.
So.
And my father, who was from the North Georgia area, he was born and raised in Rome, Georgia. At 14 years old, during Prohibition, he was running whiskey. He was running shine as well as taxed whiskey, but he had to come to Atlanta to get it. And he said if he hadn't gone in the Navy, he'd have wound up dead.
Well, yeah, and it's all over the country. I mean, it's all over the over the country, because the Prohibition was just in America.
Uh-huh.
So it's almost hard to meet someone whose ancestors weren't doing it. So
made good money at it too, and even sold it to the sheriff. Sold the good stuff to the sheriff.
Yeah, exactly. So.
But yeah, I really believe that this story is going to be an amazing story, and some of the answers, maybe not all of them, because he could be at the bottom of the East River or the Hudson River. But that being said, you're going to hook up with family that knows stories. Because
honestly, no one in my family really talked about it, and I tried to get information growing up, and people were, very closed-mouthed, because it was a terrible stain on the family, and his surviving siblings refused to talk about it. And my dad, I think I heard him say the words "my father" once in his entire life. So it's so it's hard to get any. And of course now all those people are gone. You know, the people who actually knew things have passed away. You know, because.
But what is so interesting, Ellen, is things always bubble up to the surface.
Yeah.
I found that out in doing family history. The secrets they try so hard to keep secret always bubble up to the surface.
Well, it'll have to bubble up to the surface. Yeah, I mean, the only way I can really do it now is because I've checked with any relatives who are remotely around, you know, closer to that time, and they're the last of them is in his late 90s. He didn't know anything. He had married into the family. So it would have to, I think, really be through ancestry. That's why I went on.
That and go back through old newspaper articles during that time in that city.
Yeah, no, that's true too. But he disappeared in Roxbury, Massachusetts, and I've tried to look up information, like, you know, Harold Seidemann was his name, and I've tried to find, you know, people like in the newspapers. Did my uncles, you know, I know that my great uncles, you know, I know they followed trails that went cold. There was some trail to Canada that went cold, but I've come up with nothing. And someone found something that said, Boston, Indiana was the last time, and I'm like, no, that's a complete mistake. Because first of all, Boston, I looked it up and it barely exists. And second of all, it was a confusion because he disappeared outside Boston for some. And one thing I think I did say is that I read a Meyer Lansky biography, and he was setting up a crew in Boston in the late 20s and early 30s. And I'm like, well, what are the odds that my grandfather wasn't either a wannabe or actually involved with that? Because I don't think in Boston in the late 20s and early 30s there was more than one Jewish crew. Mob crew. I'm guessing there was one. So, you know.
Well, the answers will come.
I hope. I certainly hope so.
I would say 99% of them will come, because once you find that little thread, it just takes you throughout the whole tapestry.
Oh.
And think about it. It might not even be a family member that the story has been handed down to. It could be a family friend down through the ages.
Mhm.
Could be anybody.
Yeah, I know. I love that.
It's so exciting. I can't wait to get you on here again and you say, fine, guess what we found?
Well, I'd love to that you get me on here again and I say, hey, my book's coming out. That would be nice.
Yeah. Well, you know you're coming back. You're a regular on the show because there's so many interesting things we can talk about.
Yeah.
That, again, we haven't even touched on the places in New Orleans that we both enjoy. And it's getting time for Mardi Gras.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to do a cozy about Mardi Gras.
Well, do you know that's what the fourth one is about?
No.
Yes, the fourth book.
Detail.
The fourth book, which will be out October 10th, is called Mardi Gras Murder. And it involves, I try to, whenever I can, involves a tradition specific to the region I'm writing about. And so there's a tradition in Cajun country called Courrier du Mardi Gras, the Mardi Gras Run. And that's what is in this, it builds, you know, the book builds to that, to the Courrier du Mardi Gras, the Mardi Gras Run. And in the meantime, there's a gumbo contest and a Miss Pelican Mardi Gras Gumbo Queen. I always have to remember, it's a long, silly title. I did that on purpose. A pageant with teenage girls. And then there's also, it's very big. There's a lot happening in this book. There's also controversy over whether or not to do an exhibit with the Historical Society about Louisiana orphan train, because people know a lot about the orphan train that went west, taking New York orphans and families, kids who have been abandoned, to the west. But I didn't know until a friend gave me a book, because she was doing research, some genealogy research for her family, that there was a Louisiana orphan train that brought orphans from the New York Foundling Hospital to Cajun country, where they were adopted.
I didn't know that either.
No, I know, and there's actually a museum. There's a museum in Opelousas, the Orphan Train, Louisiana Orphan Train Museum, which I'd love to go to sometime. so I just found that so fascinating. That, you know, and I read, she gave me this book, there's a book called From Cradle to Grave that tries, that the museum, the people involved in the museum, I think, put together, and it tries to track down as many of those, what kind of lives, you know, little paragraph or page about each of those orphans, and, you know, as many as they could find information on. You know, and some went on to have great lives, and others, you know, did not. Some were just, you know, family had lost a child and they desperately wanted, you know, another one, and it was a way of adoption. Some couldn't have children. Others just used the kids as workhorses, you know. But for the most part, and what's so fascinating is when those kids got here, a lot of them, you know, French was, in the Cajun country, that was the first language.
Huh?
You know, it went from the late 1850s to 1929 was when the last orphan train came. And so those kids were coming from New York, and they were being adopted by families who didn't even speak the same language they did. So, you know,
wow.
Yeah, so I just became, of course, fascinated and obsessed with that. So.
Well, that's something else for us to talk about next time, because believe it or not, we're running out of time.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are. You're right.
So
it does go by. It does fly by.
It does. So you'll come back in October when you launch your next book.
Oh, that'd be great. I'd love that.
All right, we'll set that up. Right now, tell the folks where they can buy your book and where they can find you, because I know now they're going to, no, y'all can't go. You got to wait a minute because you don't know where to go. So tell them where they can go and get your wonderful books and where they can find you.
My books should be available everywhere. They should be. If they don't have them at your local bookstore, ask them to get them because they should. Many libraries have them as well. They're available at online shopping sites like Amazon and Barnes & Noble online and any other Books A Million. You can go to my website, ellenbyron.com. And you can click on each book, and there'll be buy links for it. What else? Oh, yes, ellenbyron.com. I also have a Facebook page, Ellen Byron Author, and I blog with what they call a MAB, a multi-author blog called chicksonthecase.com. In fact, my post is going up on Monday, where I talk about how I went undercover to pretend I was going to rent a private jet to do research for my standalone book.
Neat. We'll talk about that next time, too. Thank you so much. Don't hang up when the show goes dark, but thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, go and get Ellen's books because she is not only a wonderful person, but she's a fantastic author. And I am bringing her back. Because we got so much more to talk about. Next week we will not have any shows. I will be out of town. But the following week we will be back on track. But don't just feel special, ladies and gentlemen. Be special. Because if you just feel special, you will never, ever be special. The difference between who you are today and who you want to be tomorrow is what you do today. So if you want to change who you are, then do something different. Because if you don't do something different, you will just stay the same. Now, if you want to achieve greatness, please stop asking permission because nobody's going to give it to you. They don't want you to achieve greatness because they haven't achieved their own greatness. And it doesn't mean you have to be the President of the United States or the first rocket launched to the moon. Whatever you do, be great at it and enjoy the success of it. Your smile is your logo, your personality is your business card, and how you leave others feeling after having had that experience with you, ladies and gentlemen, that is indeed your trademark. And if you don't believe me, try it. Because we're all walking a journey. Yes, others will walk it with us, but it's still our journey. And we don't know that journey that other person is on, and maybe they need that smile from you. Maybe they need you to be kind to them because others have not been. Do not bully other people. Do not be rude to other people. Be kind, because kindness always floats to the top and makes you the bigger person. Yes, I have been guilty in the past and will probably be guilty in the future of not always being kind. But then I have to catch myself and apologize, and that is the bigger person, is to understand you screwed up and now it's time to make it right. Do not go to bed angry with yourself or others. And always, always, always love yourself and like yourself, because if you don't, then no one else will. Accept the flaws of others as you accept your own. Miss Ellen, thank you so much for being here. Again, it was a wonderful, wonderful night. Can't wait to bring you back in October because we got so much more to talk about.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You are welcome. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will be off next week, but the following Wednesday we will be back with a bang. I want to thank my guest, Miss Ellen Byron, for being here. This is Yvonne Mason with Off the Chain, and we want to say good evening. Okay, we're off the air, but, of course, everything we talk about is going up in the archive show, and you know that I'm going to download the show and then tag you in it once it hits the archives. And then I will send you all of the podcast. I put it up on tomorrow, too. And I think we might even be on Google Play somewhere out there.
Oh, great.
And when I tag you in the archive show and all the other podcasts, if you notice tonight when I was putting the show, I put hashtags and different tags. That automatically goes over to my Twitter feed.
Oh, okay. That's great.
So let's say somebody's looking for your name on Twitter. If they just type in Ellen Byron, then it's going to bring up the podcast. It's going to bring up your books. It's going to bring up the interviews. It's going to bring up you. So anytime you want to share anything, if you'll put the hashtags in the tag, and if your Twitter is linked to your Facebook page, it will automatically feed over to your Twitter page.
Oh, okay.
So thank you, my darling. I am just so excited. I cannot wait to bring you back. I will send you some dates.
Oh, thank you.
You
thank
are
you
so welcome. I don't know where the hour went. It just
I know it did go by very quickly, I have to say.
I could sit and listen to you talk all night. You're so interesting.
Oh, well, I really you ask great questions and you manage it all beautifully. You keep it very you just do a great job.
Well, thank you, darling.
Thank you.
It's all about y'all. I'm telling you. Johnny Carson taught me well.
Well, now, good luck with everything, and I hope your husband's health is strong and good as you move into the future.
Thank you. Just keep him in your prayers.
I will.
Doesn't there's a bad flu season going around, and I don't want his body to get compromised.
Yeah.
Because with all of his other health issues, he does not need the flu.
Yep. All righty.
Well, go and have some. You are welcome. Go and enjoy your evening, and I will send you dates in October, and we will pick this up again.
Fantastic. Okay,
Thank
take
you,
care. Bye, Yvonne.
Bye-bye.